This example shows you how to create a Pygame program and have walls in it so that your player, the sprite, moves around and can't go through the walls. In this case, I've got a total of 3 walls. I've got a wall up top that I can't move through. I've got a wall over here on the left, and I've got this one wall sort of jutting out right here. And the player, the little white icon, can move around with the keyboard but can't move through the wall. He or she can move off the screen because there's no wall down there, but I can't move on these walls. So how do I manage to accomplish this? Let's take a look. Okay, first off, I import Pygame and I set some standard colors. Next, I've got a class called wall. Not really too much important with the wall. It's a simple sprite, derives from Sprite, and I take in an XY of the top left corner of the wall that I want, along with a width and a height of the wall. All walls have to be rectangles. I can't have any circle walls. I can't have any diagonal walls. We have not yet, as far as our games go, invented the circle or anything fancy, so all we're working with so far are blocks for our walls. Now, I call the initial constructor right here, and then I take the width and height that was given to me and I create a surface with that width and height and fill it in with blue. If you want a different colored wall, change that to the color that you want. Next up, I get the rectangle from this image, so I get the rectangle for the image and I set the top left corner, the XY, to what I was given when I initialized it right here. Scrolling down and taking a look at the player, a little bit more happening here. This controls the speed of the player, and I modify the change X and change Y depending upon what key the user hits. This is the constructor, and for this I call the initial sprite just like I did in the prior example. The player is 15 pixels by 15 pixels, colored white. I, just like before, get an image rectangle and I set the XY equal to the initial player position, which was passed in when I call the constructor. So the init is a whole lot like the wall. So the init for the player is a whole lot like the init for the wall. I have a change speed function that I call depending upon what key the player hits. I pass in the change in X and the change in Y and modify it here. And down here I got a little bit more of the interesting part of it. I have an update procedure. I end up having to call this specifically because I pass in a new parameter. I update the player, but it's going to depend on what wall he or she hits. First off, I move left or right. So I modify the X so the player is either going to move left or right. There might be a change X of 0, in which case the player won't move at all and I don't expect much to happen. Then I check to see if the player hit anything. For example, if the player moved left, if X was negative, and they hit something, let's say the new player's position would be right here, because we're moving to this direction, but I actually have some other obstacle in the way, like maybe there's an obstacle right here, then I'm going to have a collision, in which case the wall, indicated in this case in purple, along with the player, which is self, if they collide, I don't get rid of either one, so I don't want to get rid of either one, but I take a look for each wall, each block in the block hit list, and I see, am I moving left or am I moving right? This case right here, if the change X is positive, means I've got a block moving to the right, and the block has actually encountered an obstacle in the way and can't move all the way. So we attempted to place the block right here, for example, but that's not going to work because there's an object in the way. Therefore, I take the block's right side. So there's a self.rect.right. There's an attribute called right. We really haven't talked about it much, but there's an attribute called right of the rectangle for the block that automatically comes with Sprite, and I'm going to set this right coordinate not to be here, but I'm going to set it to the left coordinate of this guy. So I'm going to move the right coordinate of the block over here. So the block's right coordinate is going to equal the left coordinate of this block. And the right coordinate of this block we just leave alone. Likewise, if I've got the opposite happening, that is, if I've got a block here moving to the left, I'm going to take the block's left side and set it equal to the block's right side if I'm moving the other direction. This basically, rather than have the block go into the wall, we'll have the block instead go over here to this side. And it won't go quite all this way, but instead will only go part of the way. Next up, I'm taking a look at the Y. This is basically if the block moves up or down. Works almost the exact same way as before, except instead of working with left and right, I'm working with a bottom and a top. We'll see the same philosophy in platformers and multi-room maze navigations. The rest of this is pretty straightforward. I initialize a score. I don't actually use a score. I don't know why that's in here. Then I initialize Pygame, set the screen size to 800 by 600, set the title, surface, fill in the background, and create the player sprite right here. Creating the walls, that's a bit more interesting, done down here. I create 3 walls, top left of 0, 0, a width of 10, a height of 600 will give me the wall over on the left. Next wall I create with an X of 10 right here, a Y of 0, and then I create the wall over here. This wall creates a little item that juts out like this, and I've got my 3 walls that you saw in the example. Here I control the player, not really different than other examples. Down here, when I update the player, I'm manually calling update method, and I give it the list of walls. So up here where I created the walls, I've had a wall list, and I pass that to the player to make sure that the player doesn't run into any of the walls, because I need something in order to check the walls. And that's the example on how to move with walls.